Now to the question of gender, which has been obviously looming in the background, but is quite central here. Maybe to begin, what role does the appreciation or aspirational redemption of masculinity play in this movement of a multicultural or multiracial right that we were talking about before? Also, and here I'm thinking about some of your ethnography of Turning Point USA and other conferences. To what extent can women nonetheless find themselves drawn into this movement in various ways? Mm-hmm. And then to fast forward to this world we live in after the election, where we've seen increasingly or immediately after Trump took office, a far-reaching attack on DEI, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's in the government, in universities, and corporations, which are now taking apart these initiatives that have been moving forward over the past decade. So how does this widespread assault on DEI either solidify or compromise the diverse right-wing coalition that we've been talking about?
Okay, I may have to ask you to ask me that second question again after I answer the first one, and they're both really important ones. Gender is fundamental to all of these phenomena, and it's the point that will relate this first question to the second one. But certainly, as a form of fascist affect, masculinity matters enormously. It always has in any fascist formation, partly because it's about dominance and about control and about winners and losers and about who can, who gets to make who suffer and who gets to make who submit. And these are read as masculine in American culture the same way they are in European culture and elsewhere. And so this stuff has been a way, this is the very basis of, say, the Proud Boys, right? The idea of street violence and of a fraternity and a sense of bonding and a sense of meaning and a sense of belonging between and among men has been through misogyny and through violence, right? So there's something cultural in the street value of masculinity in those kinds of formations. You see it culturally in and certainly in the, really across the first Trump administration, the real the fascist comportment. The political theorist Bill Connolly wrote a great book, Aspirational Fascism, where he takes up all the cultural aspects of like what the male body and the kind of like the male body, the invulnerable male body, which is closed off and is armored, either on a football team or at a militia rally or whatever else, is a way of. It's an approach to the world. It's an approach to other people. It's an approach to your job. It's an approach to sports and life and culture, and it's an approach to power, which is already all over American society. It's just organized and concentrated in these fascist politics. Partly it matters because, in political terms, what it reads out, right? What gets read as the feminine in American political culture, for instance, is nurturance, care, interdependence, mutual aid, right? These are things that are that we read as what happens in the home, what mothers give to babies, as opposed to something that we would imagine happens or should happen collectively. So for right-wing politics, cooperation, mutuality, care, nurturance are things that have to be eradicated, have to be shut down, have to be closed off. And that's culturally enacted through male bodies, through masculine bodies and through masculine forms. And then that also then means that you must defend that position against all potential opponents. And the way even, someone pointed out recently, I forget where I saw it, but that, if you look at what Mark Zuckerberg looks like now, or Bezos looks like now, or they're all like jacked, they're all like on steroids or testosterone or whatever. They didn't used to look like that, or Musk also. There's a way that the kind of like the fascist cultural comportment, the performative aspects of it, tell you so much that you need to know about how this is fascist altogether. And it matters because it's meant to close off any kind of vision of the left that we would want to see. So in terms of the multiracial right, this was a way to draw in some black men, certainly around questions of, I think after the Dobbs decision last year, the question of what women's autonomy would be, and not just what women's autonomy, where women are and should be in the world, came to the fore as an organizing component of what would happen now in the states in the post-Dobbs era. Were states going to fight, for or against the right to abortion? And then the right to abortion then becomes sharpened again as a question of male authority and control of the household, and male authority and control of women's bodies, and the role of what women should be doing in the, where they should be. Should they be in the workplace, or should they be in the public sphere? Should they be in the home? Well, all the anti-abortion stuff moves towards women being in the home as controlled figures. Now that's different a little bit than this kind of like ultra incel stuff, which is just anti-woman altogether. It's just pure misogyny. But traditional fascism has always had a strong natalist component of women as reproducers of the culture, women as in the home producing the moral subjects that, and meeting their needs for recognition that they can go out into the world as men and act. So that's different than, and that's the more, now you see J.D. Vance kind of, these other folks, push this. It's also tied closely to, I think some of this is borrowed from Orban and Hungarian politics and East European right-wing politics generally. But there it is articulated and has now since come through Orban into American conservative politics around this idea of parental sovereignty and family sovereignty, around both then what's being learned in schools in terms of critical race theory, but also what's learned in schools in terms of LGBTQ identity or life or anything else, or as they like to demonize it, muster the possibility of people outside of the home who are determining the chemical mutilation of children, as they say it, right? So the idea of parental sovereignty is a deeply gendered thing. It was about male father authority over a woman who's raising children in the household against teachers, against public schools, against teachers' unions, against public goods generally, against the idea of a public generally, right? This is, part of this goes back to, there's a Thatcherite version of it, right? That says there's no such thing as society, there's only individuals and families. And the family aspect of this really matters in terms of how this gendered world is enacted as a fascist world, because again, for right-wing politics generally, as for so much of politics, I think, mainstream politics, the family is the nation writ small, and the family structure of authority is the structure of the nation writ small. So that gender stuff really matters, and it provides. But for the multiracial right, it provides on-roads through anti-abortion politics, through evangelical politics, through patriarchal politics generally. And through kind of like the idea that the Harris campaign triggered a lot of that stuff as well in its own way, right? Through the intersected relationship of race and gender, and where we saw that. And I don't think it's true that Harris lost because she's a black woman, but those aspects of it were animated throughout because they so easily fit the logic of it. And all the trans stuff, all the anti-trans stuff is really about gender threat, right? And about not having clear boundaries or clear, and that gets into the second question about DEI here. So the DEI stuff both moves backwards and forwards. The CRT stuff kind of fell away a little bit during the early days of the Trump campaign, then came back, or as something that was happening.
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory, yes. now it's back fully, and it's back partly because the work that race has always done in American politics is used as a battering ram against every other public good, against any other redistributive impulse, against any other idea of collective freedom or social freedom. If you go in there with race and destroy and say that it's what you're doing is you are protecting white people from black people, then you end up protecting capitalists from social provision, right? So the DEI stuff now can be used, it's like, you know, he spreads it like peanut butter on anything, right? Like to be used against as an anti-trans politics and an anti-black and anti-brown politics. But it works in a specific way right now in regard to the state because it builds on this long-standing discourse that the federal state, and this goes back to the civil rights movement, this goes back to the 30s, it goes back to the Dixiecrat revolt, that the federal government, it goes back to Reconstruction, really. The federal government represents blackness. The federal government represents non-whiteness. The federal government represents a form of dependence that white people don't benefit from. This was disrupted during the New Deal, but only disrupted during the New Deal insofar as black people can be kept out of federal guarantees, which they were all over the place, right? But by the time the Johnson's Great Society program comes around, after the Civil Rights Act and Great Society and the EEOC, black and brown people there's movements towards creating the possibilities of equity by using the federal state. And this is what, is what brought together white Southerners and Northern conservatives to begin with, the idea that the federal state was making things more equal. And so you had to destroy and demonize the federal state in order to, for conservatives, for Southern racists, you want to get rid of the federal state not because you hate the New Deal in the 1930s, but because you hate black people and you want to make sure that they're not equal. If you're a Northern conservative, you may not be so concerned about black people, but you know that using that language can help you destroy the regulatory state that you don't want in your way, right? So that's how race and the federal state go together. So, you know, 2025, Musk is taking his, the chainsaw that Milei gave him at CPAC the other day and destroying major parts of the federal state. And the only way that you can defend it is by saying, if you just said, we're getting rid of the federal state because it offers people these entitlements, these guarantees, these regulations, these ways of having a functional park system, whatever, that's not going to work. You have to have a monster. You have to have forms of demonization. DEI is the language then to do that. And because you get, so what Musk is doing is he's not just going after, and this is where, many people on the left get this, say Jacobin magazine gets this terribly wrong, for instance, or Ben Burgess, or these other people who imagine themselves as kind of like left Trumpists, I guess, I don't know. But the idea is that what was been going after was just corporate DEI, corporate PMC, professional managerial class diversity, equity, inclusion programs, and those were just for the capitalist class anyway, so fuck them. But actually what we see is that's not what's going on. They are stripping back every form of anti-discrimination and guarantee of racial equality going back to the '64 Civil Rights Act and before. They're smashing all the way through the EEOC right back there, having already destroyed the Voting Rights Act of '65. So this is what the work of DEI is doing generally. It works for Trump because Trump wants to guarantee white racial nationalism for a certain amount of his base. It works for Doge because it allows them to destroy the regulatory state for the capitalists.